So this is not my main field of interest, but we do have a lovely map library and special collection at COGS that not very many people know about, so I wanted to get the word out because I love it. I think it's absolutely fascinating. So I had some contributions for my project, or my talk here, from Trish LeBlanc, who's our campus librarian. She's in charge of the collection. And one of our students worked there this summer doing some work. He's in the audience today, Stats Wong, and he helped with some of the statistics for today. So just for those of you who don't know where COGS is or have never heard of COGS, it's the Center of Geographic Sciences, located in the Annapolis Valley of Nova Scotia. We're about 2 hours from Halifax, straight west, pretty much on the Bay of Fundy. And what is COGS? I find a lot of people have heard about it over the years, but don't know much of the history on it, so I'll just quickly tell you about that before we get into the collection. It started back in the post-war era when there was a man named Dr. James Hall who had bequeathed some money in his will for the purpose of establishing a vocational training school in the Annapolis Valley. This money languished for, I think it was about 30 years. Nobody was really willing to take the initiative to start a school until a man came along by the name of Major James Church, who had been tasked during World War II. He started training land surveyors, training soldiers to be land surveyors in Halifax for the war effort. Once the war ended, he wanted to continue his training school and moved back to the Annapolis Valley, where he was from, to do this survey training school, and heard about the bequeathment from Dr. Hall and petitioned his estate to allow him to use those funds to establish a vocational training school for the purpose of training land surveyors. It was called the Nova Scotia Land Survey Institute for a number of years, and their only focus was to train land surveyors. Eventually, they started branching out a little bit, and by 1961, they expanded a little bit, and they had classes and programs in photogrammetry and cartography. The photogrammetry one sort of died out as technology changed over the years, but the cartography program is still going strong there today. Throughout the late 60s, early 70s, into the 80s, the program and the school expanded more and more, including programs in property mapping, planning, remote sensing, computer programming, and GIS when that first became into existence. And eventually people decided that with all those programs, maybe the Nova Scotia Land Survey Institute was no longer a very accurate name for it, the school, and they changed in 1986 from the Nova Scotia Land Survey Institute to the College of Geographic Sciences. That name stayed for about another 10 years or so until in 1998, there was a series of vocational training schools and smaller colleges throughout the entire province of Nova Scotia that banded together to form the Nova Scotia Community College system. The Centre of Geographic Sciences decided to become a part of that system to take advantage of the wider infrastructure and whatnot. And in 1998, we changed our name, in 99, we changed our name for the final time to the Center of Geographic Sciences, still maintaining the nickname and acronym COGS. So the collection that we have at COGS is called the W.K. Morrison Map Collection. It is housed in our map library, which is named after Dr. J.B. Hall, and is called the J.B. Hall Map Library. And W.K. Morrison, his name is Walter Kenneth Morrison. He was born in 1924 and passed in 2011. He was from Massachusetts originally and spent much of his life in Cape Breton, which is part of Nova Scotia. He was a cartographer for quite a bit of his career at the National Geographic Society, and then moved back to Nova Scotia and taught cartography at originally the Nova Scotia Land Survey Institute, and then which became the College of Geographic Sciences. And he taught there from 1966 through 85. He had a vast history. He had, I didn't realize I was leaning on the button there. These ones that you don't actually have to tap are throwing me off. He had a history in antique maps, and especially those that of Atlantic Canada And he was very interested in how studying antique maps and the evolution of antique maps helps show the changing technology for cartographers. So that's where he sort of established and built his collection on, was focusing on Atlantic Canada and early 20th century Nova Scotia publications. When he was nearing, or post-retirement, when he was nearing his later stages of life, he began donating some of his map collection to the college. It started in about the year 2000, where he started donating bits and pieces of his collection to us, and we received the last of his collection in 2011 after his death. His estate gave us the last of his collection. He wanted to preserve and conserve his collection in perpetuity, and he thought it would be a benefit to our school to have this, which it has been. So some of the specifics of the map collection, in title, he gave us over 2,000 items. There are a wide range of atlases, individual maps, books on the history of printing, the history of ink, paper, cartography, typography, various reference books on watermarks, engraving, map makers, and map collections. So it is a really, really wide range of materials that we have. There's 40 atlases in the material, the oldest being John Senex's 1721 atlas called the New General Atlas. There's about 500 individual maps also donated. The oldest is one of the maps from Sebastian Munster's 1545 edition of Ptolemy's Geography. There's 64 charts and views from a very well-known in the Atlantic Canadian region historical atlas called Atlantic Neptune from 1777. It was created by J.F.W. DeBars. And there's 35 maps and charts from Jacques-Nicolas Bellin's work, and he was a cartographer from 1703 through 1772. We also have the complete run of Gentleman's Magazine from 1731 through 1802 as part of the collection, and our oldest book in the collection happens to be a 1653 book on surveying, which is sort of interesting to look at. You know, I know nothing about modern day surveying, much less historical surveying. So I said, well, I'm actually an instructor. I don't work in the map library. I like to go up there and just look at things because it's all pretty cool. So we have all these paper resources, print resources. So I think it was about 10 years ago, Trish LeBlanc, our map librarian, started a digitizing project to get it all online. So it's an ongoing project to digitize, scan, georeference, and create metadata for our entire collection. So far, the platform she's using is one called Islandora. It's an open source software framework. It's Canadian, it's developed out of Prince Edward Island, hence the name Islandora. I don't actually know much about it, but that is their blurb on what you can read about it. But that is a software framework that we use to house the collection. At this point, the numbers of October 15th, so just a couple of weeks ago, we've got 1,352 of the map pieces scanned and georeferenced. There's approximately 400 maps that still need to be digitized. This past summer, I mentioned we have a student here, Stats Wong, that worked in the collection. He managed to complete about an additional 337 maps this summer, which was a huge amount of work, and Trish has expressed to me numerous times how helpful he was to her. He streamlined her production process and made a lot of improvements to her progress. So I was to give Stats a special shout out. He's sitting right there. Yeah. I'm sure he'd be available at any point this afternoon or during the banquet to answer questions about the work he did this summer. Right now, when you go onto the digital website, there is not the full number of maps uploaded there because there's a bit of a backlog while getting the metadata created. So we're a little further on the scanning and georeferencing than we are on the entry of the metadata. And Trish estimates that we still have 662 of the scan maps to be uploaded. So they're on their way. 5 minutes? Okay. So that's just sort of the history behind the collection. I have a few just maps to show that are some of my personal favorites from the collection and some of our noted pieces that are liked. And I'm just going to skip ahead here. to my notes. So our oldest map that we have in the collection is this one. It's the Nova Graecia 22 Nova Tabula. It was from Ptolemy's Geography. It's from 1545. It's a lovely map. I just took a couple screenshots here because I wasn't sure how reliable the Wi-Fi was going to be to switch and show the collection live. If I have time at the end, I'll pop it up for us and we can look at a couple maps. So that's the oldest map we have in your collection. My personal favorite in the entire collection is this one. It's the Mercury Orbit Chart, MOC3, from the Aeronautical Chart and Information Center of the US, and it's from 1961. I think it's absolutely cool because it's been in space. It's one of the two maps that John Glenn had with him in space when he was on his Mercury Gemini capsule, the first manned mission. Walter Morrison had been a schoolmate of the cartographer who made this map. So in 1995, the cartographer gave him his copy of it. And personally, I just think it's really cool that I have held in my hand something that has been in outer space. The map geek in me just loves that. And it's a pretty nice looking map too. It's about, the dimensions are on the website, but it's about this big by about that big. And I believe I wouldn't quote me on this, but I believe the other copy of this that he had in space is in the Smithsonian. This one is the first plan of the city of Halifax. Being in Nova Scotia, I'm quite interested in this one. I think some of the not important features, but some of the interesting features I think of this is that this is from Henry and Cave in 1749, and you can still identify some of the city in it. Some of these features still exist, however many years later that is on my nervous, I can't do math in my head right now thing. But if you're just to look over, item number 3 is still existing. There is still a parade there just before. You can't see it on the scan. Number 4, the government house, that building is still standing. That street structure is still the same as today. So I quite find that interesting to see. Another interesting one I love is this map from Rapkin in 1851. It's of Eastern Canada and New Brunswick. Some of the things I like about it is it's beautifully, the engraving on it is just absolutely gorgeous. If you see it in person and up close. On the upper left-hand corner, there's an engraved view of the harbor at Quebec City at the time that has an incredible amount of detail in it. In the center, there's what appears to be like a native scene or depiction at the time, which I'm not sure if it's a little stereotypical or not. I wasn't around in 1851 to see what people actually, were dressing like, or if that is just a European generalization of the native community, but the detail in the engraving of it is just gorgeous. A few things to note about this one is that for the detail of the map, there are a few notable mistakes and errors on it for 1851 that you would have thought wouldn't have shown up at that point in time. Some of the islands in the Passamaquoddy Bay of New Brunswick, which is the bay that's sort of right along the border where Maine and New Brunswick join each other, they're missing the islands. So Grand Manan Island is missing, Campobello Island's missing. There's some smaller island chains that they call the Sisters and the Wolves. Those are missing. Deer Island's missing. So for some reason he left out, 1 minute left? Okay. So for some reason he left out a significant number of islands, and there is what I find to be a major typo on this map in that they called the city St. John's, New Brunswick, which it's the oldest incorporated city in Canada. It was created by Royal Charter in 1785, so a good 80 years before this map was done. So the name had been finalized for 80 years as St. John, New Brunswick. It's always spelled out S-A-I-N-T with no S on the end, but he has it incorrectly as St. John's. And another interesting map is from the JFW DeBar's Atlas. It's the River St. John. Notable features on this one is that there is a lot of terrain depicted that is all completely false. It does not act, there are small mountainous hills throughout that entire area. None of those that are shown on here are accurate in any way. Wangel is telling me my time is up, so I am going to say that I just had also shown a new Universal Atlas of the World, which is just a really beautifully created atlas. This is just a page out of Switzerland The atlas itself is 20 pages long and is absolutely beautiful. And if you want to look at our collection online, I'm out of time, but I do have a series of cards here advertising our collection that has the contact information and whatnot on them. Feel free to chat with me afterwards. There are some of these out on the desk by the registration table. Thank you very much.